Yes, Isabel.
Awesome. I just thought I better make sure. I'm like, oh, I forgot to ask you that before. Well, we're live here on the decision table. So thanks, Isabel, for being here and for just coming and having a conversation. That's what we're about here. We're about two humans having a conversation and hopefully using insights around. I like to use different lenses each month. So just to give you an example, the first month we use the lens of something that I'm writing a white paper around, and that is the need for a new approach to leadership. I really do think that there's a few things happening across the globe right now that would really help us to start thinking maybe we need to do leadership in a different way. Maybe there's some things we could change as humans that could be beneficial, maybe, just maybe, to, you know, the human race and to where we're going right now. And then on this month, I really want to bring the lens of looking through what I believe is there's three white papers, and this is the second one, which is around the importance of the muscle of human intelligence. And what I mean by that is that as humans, we have amazing data within us, whether it's through our brain, whether it's what we're learning, whether it's our environment, whatever it is, there's amazing data that we have. And what if we could use that and use it to actually add value to where we need to go as a society? And, you know, leave behind maybe even footprints that are really good for the next generations to come. I mean, yep. It would be pretty awesome, wouldn't it? And then next month is actually around, the lens is around seeing humanity as stakeholders at the decision table. And I say this because I feel like our conversation today is the mixture of all three. Exactly, and that makes me really excited because this, I don't know, like I don't even know where to start on that, but what does it bring up in you when you hear all those three things?
Well, first of all, I would like to acknowledge you for the work you do. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people right now currently with everything that shifted in the world. We had to shift our habits. We had to shift our reality and the way we do not only business, but the way we communicate with one another. So I think you doing that and like starting with these shows, first talking about leadership and how that shifted, and now talking about like being right now at the crossroads for like the bridge between humanity, because eventually we had to go back out there in the world. And what have we done, you know, in the past few months? It really is gonna set us for the next couple of months in the year, by the end of the year, and probably like the year after that. So that will be like my first thought on what you just said, and I really want to commend you for doing a great work in that regard.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, so if we think of this and we think of, you know, just pulling it, let's go straight in. The global, across the global landscape, we can see through economic, we can see through social, we can see through environmental. There are challenges that are facing us as a globe, not just as individuals, but as a globe. So in the global space, how do you see, or what do you see in lots of ways? If you think of the racial tension, you think of gender inequality, you think of all these ripe conversations, inclusion in culture, there's a lot of space that you could almost say that the gap is widening right now. How do you see us narrowing that gap?
That's an interesting question, and definitely stands for a lot of conversation. But to give you my expertise in that field, so for your audience here to kind of like get to know more about me, I am the founder of an organization called the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. Basically, my entire life, over the past decade or so, I've been a human rights law specialist. So that's what I specialize in, teaching other people about their rights in general. So the thing that I found very interesting through my studies, through my career, through interacting with people, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, in the African continent, and so forth. I work globally, like our organization is global, is the common denominator of all these problems that you mentioned, gender inequalities and bringing the gap on the social inclusion and like criminal justice and
Yeah.
all this, problems that we are facing in my country, in your country, and everywhere around the world, they have one problem, and that is the lack of education about human rights in general.
Mm.
So there's a lot of misconception and confusion on what are human rights when the universal, and that's what I found, and that's what I teach my students. I teach a human rights class every month, and I basically certify the next generations of human rights consultants that they
Wow.
will go out there in the field and teach others human rights. So by just looking at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was the core document that started to talk about the concept of human rights. Up until that point, we didn't even
Mm.
have them named human rights. They were the rights of man and other rights, but not human rights.
Yes.
So a lot of people just go directly into the declaration and the text of the declaration and the articles and, don't discriminate and we are all born free and equal. But the preamble of the declaration, meaning, the statement of the reason why that declaration was adopted, the whole purpose was not necessarily to have human rights respected. It
Mm-hmm.
was to teach other people the respect for human rights.
Wow.
So what I find that it's not necessarily a problem in our society, it's just a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
is that human rights, when somebody's teaching you your human rights, doesn't mean that it's teaching you that you have rights. It's just teaching you the principle of respect for other people's rights. Because as a Latin saying used to say, it was just like your right ends where the right of others begin. So that's what the declaration does basically. And the dream when the drafters adopted was to have it on every
Mm.
school on earth. So basically talking about leadership and kind of like bringing up to your next topic on humanity, I truly believe that if the new generation of leaders would be taught in school, and I'm talking here not about going to a master's degree in human rights in the 21st century. I had to go to a master's degree, and I have two actually, to know my human rights. And that's not fair. That's
Wow.
outrageous. So every kid on earth, including like primary school age children, should basically learn about. And I know Australia, it's a very good example because they do have a law in that sense. And I really hope that it's taken as a model. Of course, any model can be improved, but it's at
Mm.
least taken as a model and be taught in every school on earth. Here, it's optional, and in the majority of countries in the world, it's optional. So that's why when people like those kids that they didn't have the knowledge necessary, they end up being leaders, leading our countries, doing legislation. These people are not bad necessarily, but
No,
they
it's
they
so
they
true.
don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
They want to do like look, even look at the pandemic. What happened? Our leaders and everywhere around the globe,
Mm.
they thought it's one problem, like a health problem, a health issue,
Yeah.
the pandemic. But then when they were trying to fix that, they hit a wall. They hit other problems, like, for example, the human rights of people with COVID, or the
Mm.
human rights of people who don't have COVID, because,
Yes.
they were. So if you don't see, you don't get the knowledge, like the basic human rights knowledge in that regard, you can actually be a great leader, because it doesn't allow your human intelligence to go beyond
Yeah.
that margin of understanding all angles and why is it important. So that's why we have so much confusion with, I'm sure you are aware, with all the like the protests happening and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a distinct line between being an advocate and an
Yeah.
activist. And that's what I teach a lot of my students. It's not a bad thing to be an activist, but to be an advocate is being, meaning going beyond that. It's not
Yeah.
like, because if you just go on the street and you say, you may be aware of all those campaigns, stand up for your rights. But
Mm-hmm.
how can you stand up for your rights if you don't know what your rights are? If you only think, honestly, like if you just go in the United States, for example, on the street and ask people, okay, what are your rights? Okay, what are your rights? 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 Okay, what human rights do you think you have? The majority of people, you'll be shocked. The majority will tell you, I have the right to vote. I have the
Yeah.
right to an attorney. They will tell all this, which is true. You do have a right, to remain silent, like
Mm,
call Miranda
yes.
right. But that's a procedural right. It's not a human right. Then again, you have this differences between civil rights and human rights. Nobody's teaching us in school how to make that
Yeah.
difference, and all of that. So that's what I feel like we are missing in terms of leadership, to going into adding more that of human intelligence and being able to bring down that gap. And I'm not just going to say that's going to happen overnight. It might take me a few generations of students that I need to teach.
I was hoping you had that magic pill, that everyone wants. They just go, give it to me. And I think this is part of the problem, though, isn't it? It's not an overnight thing. This is
Yeah.
systemic things that have been put in place for many generations that we are now saying, well, maybe these are not working. Maybe this is not the best way to do it. But I think there's still this major gap. And I love the fact that we get to talk about the three combination. I don't often get to talk about all three at once. But it's so important that here we want to have a new approach to leadership. That means there's going to be change. That means maybe we are going to take some things on with us. But for me, the new approach, one of the things is bringing new lenses. And instead of saying, this is how you're meant to do it, this is what it's got to look like, we go, what if we use lenses, have a conversation, create awareness around it, and then figure out what ownership we're going to take of that and then bring change, right? So that's the new approach.
Yeah.
Then we've got the human intelligence. What if humans could think for themselves, knew they had rights as humans to have a voice at the table, be able to advocate their needs, their wants, their beliefs, their values. And then we combine that to going, what if we go back to, instead of it being individual conversations about race, gender, and all the other conversations that are all absolutely important, don't get me wrong, but first, let's bring back humans as humanity, as stakeholders first at the table. In other words, we see each other as humans first. We're working towards, as humans, trying to shift from problem to solution as humans. And then we, as humans, bring our distinctions. So I don't talk about it as diversity, but distinctions that you bring, I bring to the table. We need that at the table because that will help us use the filters that we need when we're looking through different lenses. What if we did that? That gap is just getting wider and wider because people don't want to change. That would be the new approach. I don't think for myself because the world actually trains me not to think for myself. In fact, that's part of that issue around the vaccine and everything else around there. Like, why am I having to do that? What does that actually have to look like? And then the third piece, humans. Well, we are trying as isolated things, tribes, communities, and even within that, becoming and bringing lots of, division in there, right? So how do we narrow? It sounds so good in theory. Yes, we educate, but here's the thing. What if education is just so far from even, I don't even know that it's a problem. I don't even see it as a problem. I don't even, you know what I mean? Like, then you're saying, let's get educated. And it's so important. Like, that's hugely what I do around as well. But there's a massive gap between those that are getting this piece and those that maybe are just starting looking in at this. How do we bridge that?
Okay, you touched two important points, and actually, like, explaining those points will help me answer your question, because it's not like I'm the smartest person in the world. I'm just
nor am I. I'm just a human.
Yeah, in the end, I'm just a human, but I also can talk about from my experience and from my not only from like the knowledge, but actual practical experience by doing this for so many years. So the first thing I want to touch is about, I was one of the people who were on the other side of the line in so-called, the literature calls them naming and shaming campaign. So here's what a lot of human rights organizations out there are doing. They are conducting naming and shaming campaigns, saying, basically, pointing fingers, this country you do wrong, this country you do human rights violations, this government you are doing a terrible job, and like just pointing finger. I was on that side of the road. Okay, my
Yeah.
background education is in the legal field. I worked in the cases, European Court of Human Rights, the Organization of American States. So I'm very familiar with that process. Okay,
Mm,
and I've done that a couple of years and going through law school, going through my studies, and then at one point just my mind opened up and I said, listen, I've been doing this wrong my entire life, because if we continue to do it as we do it, and a lot of
mm,
organizations out there are just throwing out hate, throwing out like what you do wrong, and they don't come with a solution. It's so easy nowadays to just
yeah.
explain the problem and don't come with a solution. And I started searching for that solution, and that's when I found that education is actually the thing that stands for us. It's the foundation of everything. And here I'm not talking only about like going to school like regular routes. It's just
Yes.
pouring into your self education about a variety of subjects. But human rights is basically the core for everything else in
Yeah.
society. Like for a great business, for a great family, for a great relationship, human rights is what makes us, which makes me kind of like get into your second point that you reached out, where you were talking about those distinctions, diversity
Yes.
distinctions. So going back to the human rights, basically I have this booklet always. I'm keeping it with me. It's made by a partner organization with ours. It's called Youth for Human Rights. But basically they made the text of the Universal Declaration um, in like just explain it in terms that anyone of any age can learn
Yeah.
it. Okay, so the first is like in like language, and legal language is all like not understandable for everyone, and especially they use it to teach kids in school too. So the first human right says we are all born free and equal. Well, my understanding of that is that if we all really applied this principle,
Mm,
we wouldn't even have to have this distinctions right
yeah.
now. We wouldn't have to have a class, a protected class. That's how it's called in legal terms. Okay,
Mm,
a protected class, meaning for racial discrimination, for LGBT communities,
yes.
for like Black Lives Matter, and for like if we all respect the first principle, and there is a reason why the drafters put it as the first one. The thing that I found again through education and
Mm,
studying is that a lot of people misunderstand the word equal. When the declaration says we
mm,
are all born free and equal, if you think about, are we all equal?
mm.
You will see, I'm always asking my students, and half of them will say no, half of them will say yes. And it's a continuous debate. If you ask somebody, are we exactly equal? And they will tell you yes and no. But then there's a difference in between being
Yeah,
equal
see, that's
and
interesting
having
because even
equal rights.
I'm asking that question myself. If I answered that question, what would I say? Well, I think that it's both sides because in some ways, where are we? What was the question again? Say that again.
So is anyone exactly equal?
Is anyone exactly equal? Well, we equally all came with no clothes on. We were born, out of something, and we started with nothing, like other than our DNA. So in
Sure.
that way, we're equal. But on the other side of it, I'd go, no, we're not equal because we might be born into different environments that give us access to different things. So then that makes us less equal.
Sure. And even if you look at a physical appearance, like maybe I'm a woman, like my husband is like, and I'm 5'8", my husband is 6'4". We are not equal. Okay. There are differences, but
Wow.
there is a difference between being equal and
Mm,
having equal rights.
right.
And
Mm,
that's the
mm,
key that I found, that like once I teach
wow.
somebody that, they just open up and realize, hey, it's really making sense how education from this, like, honestly, when was the last time have you heard that somebody is using a dictionary in school, or even like whatever, like
Well, I use it
you,
all the time because I'm dyslexic and I can't spell.
I mean,
But
you're
you're right.
fortunate,
Yes.
but I can tell you that not a lot of people use a
Yeah.
dictionary, and it's not only the spelling part of it, but it's also, like the word the the in English has over 26 definitions. Over
Wow,
26,
no
the word
way.
the. It's just unbelievable. So there are so many things out there for us to go and explore in terms of education. And I always make it sound so cool because it's cool education. So I just hope that I made you and your audience to kind of like be inspired that maybe, just maybe, I'm not trying to convince anyone, but maybe if we kind of like shift a bit and we feel like, we are still going to continue to have human rights violations and inequalities, and we can even like don't bring that gap down, maybe we should kind of like try to change something. And I found that
Mhm.
education about human rights for people, it just works. And just, you don't even have to be formal, just telling
No.
everyone, like, have a read with your family, or go on Facebook and give value to people, just read a couple of these rights to them, or just show them some videos about that, and things like, you don't have to
I love
kind
that.
of like
I
have
love
a
that.
seminar room,
Yeah.
to do that.
I think one of the things that is really important, especially when you're talking at a global space and wanting to see big change across the globe, often, and I hear this a lot from community and clients and people who are curious around
Mhm.
what the work that I'm doing is, I hear what you're saying, Kira Marie. I hear it's amazing. And yes, we do need change, but it's so big and like so massive across the globe. Look, I just think I don't even know where to start. And I think what you're saying there is, hey, let's educate, but we can educate in ways that is so simple for every single one. I don't think that there is an excuse to why we can't be educated around it. And yet, and I do say yet, because there are definitely people who push back on this. Why do you think people are pushing back to want to even start being curious about the change, let alone put change into practice?
Yeah, well, here's what I think and why this is happening. Again, like, we are looking at the bigger picture, and we miss seeing the picture just in front of us. To give you
Mm,
just like a common example, maybe in my situation, okay, when I first arrived into the US, I didn't know anyone. I had no friends, no family around. I had to get myself out there and be known. So in just 1 year, with my passion and my desire of teaching others in my community, I basically starting from teaching my city, to getting from like the mayor of the city where I was living at a time, to the county legislator, the New York state senator, the New
amazing.
York governor, and I ended
Mhm.
up being awarded by the president of the United States, just
Mm,
in like over a bit over a year for all that work. But my goal was not to help like get to reach to the president of the United States, or my goal was not necessarily to reach everyone like the United States and beyond that, like on a global scale. My goal was, okay, I'm gonna just teach everyone I meet on a daily basis about human rights, for
I
example.
love that.
And that just happened.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's what I want to inspire your audience, is
Mm,
just don't look at, oh my God, I want to make global change and I'm just one person. Like,
yes.
listen, for example, at the US Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, our goal is to give a chance to study. There are 68
Mm,
million children in the world that they don't go to school, primary school,
mm,
68 million. At a cost of only 1% of the military expenditures, those kids can go to school. But that's
yeah.
not going to happen. And I'm not going to wait for that to happen. So I took it on me and my team of volunteers, to kind
Yes.
of like teach them one by one. And it's might taking a decade, and I don't care. But what I found is, when I started, the same as with my personal example, is if I shoot, it's not that you don't have to shoot big, you do have to. But like, actually, Eleanor Roosevelt, the former
Mm,
president of the
yes.
United States lady, she was the chair when she drafted the declaration. And she actually, it's a video online where she explains that. So teaching human rights should start with your neighbor, with your school, should start simple, like in your surrounded areas, close to home, so close that it's so easy
Mm,
to do it. And that shouldn't only with human rights happen, like you right now. are offering the opportunity to educate your friends, your audience, your
Yes.
followers through the comfort of their home. And maybe this is a good thing that this pandemic helped us
Yes.
understand. But
Yes. Totally.
to answer specifically to your questions, what do we say to the naysayers? I
Yeah.
would say, you know, you you may think you're a drop in the ocean, but all the great
Mhm.
leaders, and I see you have some of them like Nelson Mandela there, and that have put change. Those were
Yeah.
humans too. It was one
They
person.
were.
A civil rights
Exactly.
movement started with one person. So why not you be that person?
Yeah.
You may not have all that desire, but you can inspire
Mm.
your son, your grandson, or somebody in your neighborhood to be that leader, and then you can just be a
Yeah.
follower. So it's not really like you have to be there, but you can help advocate for peace
Yes.
and tolerance for others, and I don't think it's anything wrong with that. And if they still continue to say that, you know what I will tell them? Listen, in this world, only 1% of the world in this world are purely evil. All the other people are good, so I prefer looking at all the other people who are good and they
I'm
want to
so
mean
with
good
you on that one.
in the world. Is like, listen, you'll never succeed.
Yeah.
You just go back to and see exactly what you're passionate about, because we are all passionate about something in the end. It's just we need to kind of like ignite that spark.
Mm. Where did that spark come from for you? How did you get inspired?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I don't think I ever actually gave it a good thought
Mm.
about that. I know I'm coming from a family of lawyer. Like basically, part of my life, I lived it in like a modest family. I was raised by my grandparents in a post-communist country in
Wow.
Romania, Eastern Europe. Um,
Amazing.
I was born exactly after the communism, but you could still feel it in the air, kind of a thing. And then I just knew that if I don't go to school,
Mm.
and it's this thing that grandparents teach you, like you have to go to school to become somebody in your life because you don't have anyone else we can support your entire life. So I went to school and nothing happened after that, kind of a thing.
Wow.
It's like you go and you do all the studies, but in school I developed this sense of like analyzing what is happening around me, and I realized that it's not just me in the world that wants to do something good. And I said, okay, I'm gonna start going more into that, because when you go to law school you just talk about like general law, and that's how I became interested and passionate about specializing in the human rights area. And then it's just such a cool area.
Yeah.
Like all these other professions are regulated. Human rights, like there are not so many human rights lawyers or
Wow.
human rights consultants out there. So
Mm.
it's not a regulated industry whatsoever. Everyone can basically call themselves a human rights consultant if they actually know what to do with people. So it's just so amazing to work in like to be the first in a niche that it's not developed.
Mm.
And it's so strange that it's not developed, because I was saying
Yeah.
the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted more than 70 years ago. But I mean, there are so many people in this world that they want to do good, and I'm just one of them. I just like to create and
Mm.
inspire others to do what I do or believe in what I
Yeah.
do, and at the same time inspire them to do something that it's for them. They don't necessarily have to follow me and like be my dreams. I have the advantage also. I like to call myself a good communicator, just because I work both in human rights, and then my life brought me to diplomacy, where I've been working also as a diplomatic protocol consultant. So I'm very good at understanding different types of cultures, different levels of
Yeah.
society in terms of like ranks and so forth. So that helped me also to kind of like guide my message to the
Mm.
right people at the same time. But at the same time, like even if I meet like a stranger on the street, I like, and even if you just call right now some of my students, you'll say, like they will tell you Isabel is the same on camera as the same as she's on stage. And
Same as me.
and exactly, because
Yes.
that's the value of human
Mm.
intelligence, like being humans all the way in. And if you really do something from your heart, you
Yeah.
don't have any stops. And that's what I felt like. I'm doing something from my heart, nothing can stop me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember one of the moments that was so pivotal for me was I get to work with a lot of extremes. So sometimes I'm with a whole lot of global leaders, and before the pandemic, I was on global stage, and they were really smart people. I mean, they had letters after their names and letters on top of their letters. Like, they were like the top of the top in that way. They also were amazing innovators. They were amazing, like I actually shared the stage with a guy who was the co-founder of the NASA Medical Institute. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember standing on stage that day, and I had to call it the elephant in the room because I looked very different to every single person that was in that room, and I didn't have all those letters after my name at all. And yet I felt highly qualified to be speaking on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being was that I stood there and I said, I stand here today as an advocate for the human race and for humanity. And I have to say that was one of the proudest moments I had, was knowing that I was being an advocate to be a voice for humanity in the work that I was doing and continuing to do. And when I realized that it was beyond my lack, beyond my weaknesses, my lack of whatever it was at that moment, and it was about the fact that if I don't give voice to this, who will? And I think that that's the powerful thing when you bring it back to humanity as stakeholders. It brings it back to the thing that is beyond you. It's beyond your own lack and going, but like whether it's your immediate family, whether it's kids, whether it's your nephews, your nieces, whether it's your grandchildren, whether it's, we all have loved ones. Maybe it's a friend, a partner, a husband, a wife. We all have someone that we love that is another human being, so we can relate to that piece, that connection piece. And it's funny because I listen to what you're saying and I go, the question that comes up in my head is, have we forgotten to make humanity priority? And we think that it's the next, bottom dollar. It's the next, I don't know, achievement, goal, initiative. And we forget that actually sometimes it's really about, what if we prioritized humans? Any thoughts around that?
Sure. So first, I would just dare to say no. I meet individuals like you actually on a daily basis that confirms or helps me reconfirm that the fact that humanity is not forgotten, that we still are humans. We just have to make it more obvious to other people. We have to start hiding ourselves, behind, like right now with the pandemic and everything. What I suggest everyone is just go out there and, like, it's nothing bad to have a social media profile, for example, and just post pictures of your food or like your lively interactions, your family, your friends. But social media, it's also an avenue, in my point, to actually bring value to the people around you. Just tell them, like, just tell them you read something interesting this morning, or you listened to a great audiobook, or something like that. And that will make us more human. That will make us, like, for example, me seeing you all the books out there that I majority of them, I've read them, inspires me to do something. So just people are good. Again, like, the majority of people in this world are good. It's just humanity at times experiences some changes, some shifts, some metamorphosis, like, just I know, like, in mathematics they have like the geometrical form, so I kind of like see it from different angles, and like fractals into fractals. When we were kids, we had those little, like, binoculars that you look into it, and they have these little squares, like with colors. That's how life is, actually. You just see through the different lenses that you are talking about. That life is still there. Humanity is still there. You just have to find it in the world. And I bet if you are looking for it, and people are looking for it, they can find it. Like, you find me. We never kind of like met together, but so it's like, if you are truly true to yourself
That's
and
so
you
true.
believe in this, you actually, the universe is going to send you good people. The universe is going to give you humanity. Just give humanity to other people. Give them your value, your thoughts, your anything, and you'll get back that 10 times in
I
return. That's
love
all
that.
I get at. Yeah.
I love the fact that you see humanity and you sing good humanity. And like you said, it's only that 1%. But like the 99% are just amazing humans. And sometimes it's just, you know, when we see something, it's literally because something else is going on in their life, or, you know, something has happened and they've maybe put up some defenses, or, you know, they're angry because of something else that has got nothing to do with them or you as a human. And I think what I love hearing is just you keep going back to, but we've got good humans, and it's so true. And because of that, we need to make sure that we are continuing to shift forward as a good human race. I think that that's kind of it. I'd love to have a conversation around the, you started talking about it, but that was the activists versus advocacy, and or advocate. And I think, you know, tell you know, like, talk more about the activists. What do you see an activist being? What do you see the good things about it, and then things that are not going to be so beneficial, and then versus more on the advocacy or the advocate side of it?
No, that's a great subject to have. And again, going into my idea that a lot of words are again being misconstrued or
Mm,
misinterpreted. By the way, to bring good, like good in people, I found what is working is to acknowledge people more. Like we are used to say thank you and so forth, but before we tell them like our opinion about, like, oh, you did something wrong, oh,
mm,
I don't agree with you, or things like that, you should just acknowledge them first and say, I totally understand,
yeah.
or, like, yeah, I mean, just try to see the good in other people before you make them wrong. So that's what I found like brings,
It's so true.
humanity back
Mm,
in good people, makes you much better individual, and you also feel better about yourself. Oh, I did something great,
so
and then the
true.
conversation pops from there. But going to the other question in regards to activism and advocacy, I think I asked one of our research assistants to do a blog, which is available on our website, and it goes more in depth into it. But here's how I view it. It's not that an activist it's a bad person, or an advocate it's
No.
a good person. It's not
Mm,
like bad and right. Okay. It's kind of like the difference between being a manager and a leader,
oh,
if you know what I mean.
yeah.
An activist, its role is to emphasize the problem, while an advocate's role, as you were mentioning about your interaction when you were at that stage, was to promote a solution for a problem. And as
Oh,
an
beautiful.
advocate,
Mm,
yeah, as an advocate, what do? You go beyond mere protest and just going out there in the street, being in their faces. As an truly advocate, you help pass like public policies. You advocate, meaning like you promote the solution for that thing. As an activist, you just complain about the
mm,
problem, and you don't come with a solution. And I'm not saying that it's bad to have activists. It's just lately this term started to be so had like a negative connotation, which it shouldn't, because being an activist,
yeah,
it's a good thing. But being an advocate is really going beyond that simple, pointing fingers, how I like to call it. It's
yes.
going beyond that. It's just making sure that, like, again, my example, like my comparison
Mm,
with being a manager and being a leader, it's a
yes, great
difference.
example.
Maybe anyone can be a manager, but it takes a leader to bring up the team around him to make the company prosper
Mm,
and flourish. It's the same here. You can have one activist, but if you have one advocate with a team of activists around and other advocates, they can make wonders. And that's what I like to call it, like, and go more into, like, I'm an advocate of human rights. This is what I do on a daily basis, rather than just being an activist. I help when the Congress was open, I was going almost on a daily basis to help pass human trafficking legislation and things that go in our country and promote things like that. So that's what you do as an advocate. Plus, you are always there sharing good news,
Yeah.
and even if when you are sharing bad news, you are like a consultant. You just tell people, here's the bad news, but
Mm,
here's the solution to it, and
yes.
this is what we can do about it.
Mm.
So yeah, that's
I
how I see the
love.
difference between that.
Oh, so much goodness in that. It brings me back to what I think are the fundamentals to leadership, which is awareness, ownership, change, and sustainability. I
Hmm.
think that, and when you bring activism in, that's kind of the awareness side of it. It's the, hey, let's get this out, talk about it, make sure that people know about this. The ownership side of it is more the advocacy. Okay, now that we've created an awareness around it, what are we going to own from that? What are we going to do with that? And then, of course, the change as well. And then it's got to be a sustainable. I think there's so many. And that particular stage I was on, what was interesting was the conversation I was having was at global decision tables, like at top decision tables, there are so many things being innovative. And at the front line of humanity, and what is being innovated at that time, that space, there's a massive gap between that, and we need to actually segue that and make sure that we've got the right people at the right tables having the conversation, so we're even innovating the right things. So that was that whole conversation around that, right?
Nice.
And so for me, it was amazing being an advocate for humanity in that space. I think, if you go back to the conversation that you just had then, you brought up an interesting thing, something that I feel absolutely, as a human, like I think it's the ultimate thing that's taken away from you as a right from a human, and that's human trafficking. So creating awareness, there's huge problems across this, and the epidemic or the pandemic has actually created worse than that. And I know you would see that in your work, right? Within that sector. If we go then to the ownership piece, going, okay, cool, we know there's a problem, we know that it's massive. How can we start shifting something that's so big across the globe? How can I take or the next individual, or as communities, how can we start shifting that as a huge thing?
Well, I would say I'll dare to ask you back that question if you kind of like envision what would be my answer, but I'm sure you're like, in the short time we've been together so far, you'll know that my answer is education again. And let me explain that before, like the people are going crazy. It's like, yeah, here's this lady with the education again. So listen. For example, in the human trafficking area, just I like to always like provide solutions and give like clear examples so that people understand that I'm not just talking nonsense here.
Exactly.
Human trafficking area. There was this police officer in Texas who developed a program, a curriculum, just how to spot the signs of human trafficking. That's how
Is
it's
that
called.
the underground stuff?
Not, but I do
Oh,
know Tim Ballard.
okay. Yes.
That's a very good
Okay.
example. He's doing amazing. He's such a great individual. I had an honor to meet him a couple of years back at the UN summit, but it's not about him. I'm just talking about the law
Wasn't meant to
enforcement.
distract you then, but
Yeah, a regular law enforcement police officer
Yeah.
in Texas who developed this program, and then he started basically implementing this program into his town and into his state. He then convinced other states, like neighboring states, to adopt this program and their law enforcement. And basically what the program was doing, it's training police officers on how to spot the signs of human trafficking. You would think that they know that already because they've been through academy or whatever, they do that, but they didn't, So he created that program, and then that program shortly started to be implemented in like other border states, and the human trafficking started to go down, like really down, so down that some of the legislators were, dragged, or they were like put attention onto the fact that this program is really useful and helpful and should
Mm,
be implemented now at a federal level because it has been successful in many states. So that's
wow.
how I came across about this project, for example. And there was a law now. I'm not sure if it passed or not because every year they try to pass it, but I
Yeah.
think it's so important to pass it because basically this law would allow federal mandated system to train all the police officers on how to spot human trafficking. And this is a huge deal,
Mm,
again, educating everyone, because sometimes, like, the basic misconception about human trafficking, and I do work with a lot of victims of human trafficking, although this is not my expertise necessarily, I put a lot of help into that area, okay,
yeah.
because I
Beautiful.
I like to help, and I know there is an actual problem. But one thing that I found out is that, talking with the victims and talking with other nonprofits, is that a lot of people think, and Tim Ballard, by the way, he believes that we had a conversation about that too. A lot of people believe that to be human trafficked, you have to have, like, it has to happen violently. You have those images from movies where a girl or a boy is grabbed from the
Yeah.
street, put into a car, and then everything's. But like 80% of the human trafficking that happens specifically in the United States, it's not that at all. It's just they go there with deceived will, how I like to call it. They
Mm,
actually know where they're going, but they think they are going to enter into a better life. So
yes.
there is no
Yeah.
like, most of the time, initially, I'm not saying after that, eventually violence will happen and they get
Of
beaten and
course.
they get dragged and so for that. But to get into, like, get
Yeah.
dragged into a
They
human
find that it's
trafficking
a
scheme.
solution to what they're struggling with, or
Yeah.
they see it as, this is my hope for a better future. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we need to teach that to more people to understand that, first of all, as a citizen, you have a responsibility to report. And there are so many, like, it's so easy nowadays because there are hotlines and blue campaign line and everything. You just send a text and they'll, you don't even have to give them information. You just tell them basic information. You don't even have to get in contact with the perpetrator, and it's not recommended you do that. You don't
Yeah.
even have to get in contact with the victim. Like, if you see a girl that doesn't look like, or a boy doesn't look like it's okay with, like, another person, and you can kind of like notice things, you just, send them a text to the blue line, and they will take it from there. So it's really not much of an involvement, but it's just necessary to have a massive campaign. I remember a couple of years back, when Romania entered the European Union, they were doing this TV ads where they were teaching Romanians people about the new rights they gain as a European citizen, which
Mm,
was very funny because they were doing like this very entertaining, funny ads. And whenever, like, for example, one person will go into a store, buy a laptop, and then they want to go back to the store to bring it because it's not good, and the store owner would refuse that, basically. And the replica, the reply for the guy who bought that, broken computer would be, "You know who I am? I'm an European citizen and I have rights." Well, that simple commercial that they were playing all over and all over just stood in my mind. And then whenever I was trying to, like, all of the sudden, everyone in my neighborhood, like, even old people, like young people, they started to say this phrase, whatever, like, any injustice you'll create to them, even if it was not, something bad, they will say, "You know who I am? I'm an European citizen and I have rights." And that, for me, is like the perfect example of
yeah.
educating a society at a different level. Let's
Yeah.
just, forget about doing ads that are, just put education, play one human rights every day on TV. Do you think more people will understand, like, we are all born free and equal? Yes. Why not? But we just need more, individuals like me and you to take this torch, to take this message to the right ears and the right people to actually do something about it, because something can be done about it. It just, we have to start doing it. And I really believe in humanity and in our capacity of changing the world. We don't have to wait future generations. We can do it now. We do.
Yes.
We can.
And I think that you say that so beautifully. And I think it's people like you and I who then join together going, okay, so with what you know, how do we do this? It's not an individual thing by that point. It's actually a collective. And oh my goodness, I could talk to you for hours and hours. This has been amazing. If people want to know more about what you do, where's the best spot for them to do that?
Sure. So they can, of course, search about doing courses and like learning about our humanitarian campaigns, what we do for education at U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. It's just the acronym USIDHR.org. And my name, it's on the screen, Isabel Vladoyo. I can be found on any social media platform on earth using my real name. So I'm just welcoming any
a real name, a real human even.
I'm welcoming anyone. I'm a social personality, as I like to call myself. Even if I don't have as much time as I wanted to answer each and anyone within like 24 hours, I always get back to people's messages. And I have also an amazing team all over the world, volunteers that help me, stay on the right path. And, so anytime you either reach me directly or my team at U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, and yeah, we are looking forward to, and let's just create more human rights consultants so that they can go out there and teach others human rights, because I realized that I cannot do it by myself. So, but I can have last month I had a 504 people went live 7 hours training with me to get certified as human rights consultant. It was supposed to be 4 hours, but we went so long with the Q&A because a lot of people wanted to, pick my brain on different ideas and questions. But basically, that's what I do. I teach others so that those people can then go. Imagine those 500 people now. I thought 500, but then 500 people. They can go and just spread it to the masses. And that's what I want to do, and do as many 500 people every month that I can, so that, they can go and inspire others. And that's how we create change from, again, one individual, one organization.
Yeah, totally agree. Oh my goodness. So here's the thing. When we have a conversation, which we've just done today, I also think, like I said, it creates awareness, but then we've got to go, well, what are we owning from this, and what change are we going to bring from that? What are you going to take from our conversation today?
Well, what I'm taking first and foremost is that it's a validation of the work that I do every day, that it still matters. And it just fills my heart that there are individuals like you in the world out there that are still, bringing value to other people, bringing me as a guest and other people as well. But at the same time, it's just, I feel like having honest conversation with people and reminding them about the good in them, it's just the best job in the world. I so appreciate you for doing all that you do here. And I think it's just, I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. I didn't come prepared. We didn't even talk about any interview questions or anything. It's just two humans, as you started the conversation, talking about what we can do about it. And I think that's what people learn to appreciate more every day. And I get to learn everything every day, new things. And today I feel accomplished because I learned new things from you. And I also got validated that my work really matters, that education still needs to be out there, that there are still people that maybe, like, I know probably I educated you about being equal and having equal rights. So now the next time you see me,
that's exactly the one thing that I'm really taking away from our conversation is the fact that you said being equal and having equal rights. Like, I thought that was that was a great question to ask. And then how you think about that, I was like, wow, that kind of opens up a whole gamut of, opportunity to really, how do we have equal human rights? What does that need to look like? How can we educate around that more? Like, I really appreciate, you say that affirming what you do. You are amazing and so inspiring to many across the fact that it shows in your work. You just said 500 people were on that call of wanting to, be human rights consultants. Well, that's because there are good humans out there. You reminded us so much of that today, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, the work you continue. But I'm actually really excited because there's this new approach to leadership around Eve. I think that as leaders we need to continue to evolve, and you brought up so beautifully how this was, we didn't do these interview questions. It was so honest. It was just a conversation. We're learning from one another. But that's what leadership, I believe, is needing to go. We need to evolve. We don't say we've got all the answers. But we've been curious. We've asked questions. We've dived deeper into there. We've gone down layers rather than just going, oh, that was a nice answer. Let's move to the next question. We actually question the questions. And I think that is part of the learning ground. And I love the fact that you talk all things education. I mean, seriously, that is something that, if we just move back in time, there's been, and I brought this up at one stage about the systemic side of education and a lot of things that we're going through, but education has been one of those. So we've thought that the only way is by telling, and it's proven, and it's this. But I love the fact that you educate by conversation. You educate through making what seems big problems to going, hey, here's little solutions, and here's how we can start having that as everyday humans in our walk, whether we are in a classroom, whether we're in, got communities, whether organizations, whether, like, every single one of us through our conversation today can see how we can use what we've got in our hand to create, more human rights, like to have human rights and to be able to live them, and to see that this is a priority for humanity going forward. And I think that's just so powerful. So thank you. You have brought what could be so complex to many. In a lot of ways, you've brought it back to the simple. And I've loved the fact that I can talk about 3 really complex areas in life, and we can just have this conversation that really brings it back to, okay, we don't have to be these intense people that work at the levels that often we get to work at, right? And have to have these conversations at levels that many of those that want to come on this journey go, but I'm not there. I don't even know what to do. It sounds too big. And you brought it back in so many beautiful ways in which we can go, it doesn't matter where we are. Each one of us can watch a video, learn more, be educated more, and then put that into our daily walks of life. So for me, I'm just so grateful that you have been willing to have this conversation on the decision table. And like you, I'm so excited that and this has been the powerful thing. It really has, that each day, it's different humans that I'm getting to have conversation with, awesome humans across the globe doing amazing things. And really what's interesting about it is that we're like, and I started writing I was nomadic before the world shut down. And so I was like known as the nomadic CEO, and, traveled the world with my family. And I did a lot of work within culture and trying to, get different lenses so that my work to figure out better insights and then hopefully better solutions, right? And one of the things that I figured out through that work, and I began writing a year and a half before we shut down, and that was on this, what I saw as an epidemic, and that was isolation. And so I began writing about how isolation was massively affecting leadership, but actually it was affecting humanity. And I felt that the solution to that was collaboration. In other words, when we come together as a collective, and then that's what a lot of this is birthing out of, is the fact that, okay, you're doing amazing things, I get to do amazing things, every person that has come on this, by the way, decision table, but we're not working so much as a collective to see how we can support each other, work it out, get it happening, and maybe even shift it in a faster way so that we get more of what you're talking about into the schools, more of what someone else has said, to advocate for something else. And so this has been, for me, it's just so powerful every day. Amazing people like yourself. And like you said, so many good human beings.
That's true. I'm so absolutely excited. Thank you again for the invitation, Kiri Marie. I'm just grateful for the work you do. I hope like everyone gets to enjoy our conversation tonight. And I like the fact that you're a solution oriented person like me. And it's true, you know, isolation, it's not good for people. We just need to, even if we have walls in between us or we stay at home, we can be out there with our faces, with even a smile sometimes helps for our neighbors and for our friends and family around. So just, you know,
What a
be
beautiful
smiling in the
way.
life. Yeah.
I'm going to end this broadcast because that's such a beautiful
Okay.
way to end it. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Amazing.
Appreciate it.